I was sitting alone with a cold cup of coffee when the phone rang. 8:47 p.m. A woman's trembling voice so low as if she was afraid someone might hear. Please. You have to save your grandson, right now. If you're too slow, it will be too late. The call cut off. My hands went cold. My chest tightened. Because deep down, I knew something truly terrible was happening. I rushed to my daughter's house. One look inside, and I realized this wasn't just danger. It was something far more cruel. Something that could destroy my grandson's life. Welcome to the Dad Vengeance channel. Before we go any further, drop a comment and tell me where are you watching from your city, your country. Let me know who's in this with me. Quick note. This story includes some fictional elements crafted for entertainment and educational purposes. Any similarity to actual names or places is coincidental, but the message underneath is worth staying for. The phone rang at 8:47 p.m. I know the exact time because I just checked my watch. 34 years of classroom schedules will do that to a man. The back porch was quiet. My coffee had gone cold an hour ago. October in Marietta carries a particular kind of stillness, the kind that settles in after the cicadas go silent, and before the first frost claims the yard. I'd been sitting with that stillness, not thinking about much. Then the phone rang. Unknown number. Georgia area code. I almost let it go to voicemail. Mr. Warren Beckett. A woman's voice. Tight. Controlled. Something underneath it shaking. Speaking. Please. The word came out fast, like she'd been holding it back for hours. Please help your grandson. Caleb is in danger. You need to go to him right now. Don't wait. I stood up. My coffee cup hit the porch boards. I didn't look down. Who is this? What happened to Caleb? My name is Beverly Marsh. My son is Eli, Caleb's best friend. Same class since 4th grade. She pulled in a breath. Mr. Beckett, Eli saw bruises on Caleb's arms, on his neck, the kind that don't come from falling off a bike. My hand tightened around the phone. When, today, at school. Eli asked about it, and Caleb shut down immediately, told him to forget it. But before he shut down, her voice dropped lower. Caleb said something. He said, "Nobody's going to believe me anyway." The laugh track from the living room drifted through the screen door. Helen's Tuesday program. Something with a studio audience that found everything funny. I stepped to the edge of the porch. The backyard was dark, just the streetlight bleeding yellow over the fence. Mrs. Marsh? I kept my voice level. Are you certain about this? I've raised a son for 13 years, Mr. Beckett. I know when he's telling the truth. A pause. He was shaking when he told me. 13-year-old boys don't shake over nothing. She was right. 34 years in a classroom, I knew exactly what a scared kid looked like. Let me back up. My name is Warren Beckett, 67 years old. I taught history and civics at Harwell High School for 34 years before I retired. I know this town. I know its schools. I know how families work and how they come apart. I watched enough of both from the front of a classroom. My daughter Diane is 35. She married a man named Prescott Rains 3 years ago. I didn't like him the first time I met him, something in the eyes, something too polished, too carefully rehearsed. Helen told me I was being overprotective. I told myself she was probably right. Caleb is Diane's son from her first marriage. 13 years old. Sharp kid, the kind who asks questions without easy answers. Lately, he'd been quieter. I noticed it at last Sunday's dinner. He sat at the far end of the table, shoulders pulled in, eyes moving around the room without settling anywhere. I told myself it was the age. I told myself a lot of things. Mr. Beckett. Beverly's voice pulled me back. Are you still there? I'm here. I turned toward the back door. Does Caleb know Eli told you? No. Eli kept his promise. She paused. But he said Caleb looked at him the whole time like he hoped someone would find out anyway. That's why I called you. If that boy is hoping for something, I think you're who he's hoping for. I don't have words for what that sentence did to me. I went inside. Helen looked up from the sofa, reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, the television still going. She didn't look startled. She looked like a woman who had been waiting for me to come through that door. You're letting the cold in? She said. Sorry. I grabbed my keys from the hook by the door. She muted the television. So where are you going? It's almost 9. Out. Warren. 40 years of marriage in a single word. Is everything okay? I don't know yet. She tilted her head. Is it Caleb? I stopped. Hand on the door. Turned around slowly. She was watching me from the sofa, expression clear. Calm. Not confused. Not alarmed. The kind of calm that takes practice. What makes you ask that? I said. You've had that look since Sunday dinner. Her voice was smooth, easy. I figured you'd say something when you were ready. I stood there an extra second reading her the way I used to read a classroom, looking for the kid who already knew the answer before the question finished. Go back to your show, I said. I'll be home later. The October air hit me the moment I stepped outside. At the red light on Roswell Road, I sat through one full cycle green, yellow, red without moving. Nobody's going to believe me anyway. The light turned green. I drove. In the rearview mirror through the front window of the house, I saw the television stay dark. And then the small, steady glow of a phone screen. Helen wasn't watching her program. She was typing, focused, unhurried, like someone completing a task she'd been meaning to finish. I didn't know who she was sending it to, but the calm on her face, the timing of her question, the way she'd said, "Is it Caleb, not what's wrong?" stayed with me the entire drive. I turned onto Paces Ferry Road, heading toward Vinings. Prescott's house was 9 minutes away. I had no idea yet that the first door I reached would already be closed against me. Vinings is 12 minutes from Marietta on a Tuesday night when the highway is clear. I made it in 9. The house was on a cul-de-sac off Paces Ferry Road, 2 stories brick facade, black iron lanterns flanking the front door. The kind of house that announces itself without saying anything out loud. 3 cars in the driveway, lights on upstairs, a wreath on the door, fall colors perfectly symmetrical. I sat in my truck for 30 seconds, then I got out. I rang the bell, waited. The October air was cold enough now that I could see my own breath. I rang again. Footsteps. Measured. Unhurried. The door opened. Prescott Raines was 42 years old, 6 feet even hair combed back, like he'd just stepped out of a business meeting. He was wearing a collared shirt tucked into pressed slacks at 9:47 on a Tuesday night. Who does that? I remember thinking exactly that. Who does that? And then filing it away somewhere. He smiled. Warren. Warm. Surprised, but pleasantly so. Like I'd shown up to a party he hadn't expected me at. It's late. What's going on? I need to see Caleb. Something shifted behind his eyes. Fast. Gone before I could name it. He's already in bed. The smile stayed put. You know how it is, school night he goes down by 9. What's this about? It's about Caleb. I just need to see him for 5 minutes. Warren. His voice dropped, patient, almost gentle. The way you talk to someone who's being unreasonable and you want them to feel heard before you say no. He's asleep. You can't just, I'm not asking to take him anywhere. I just want to see him. Call me tomorrow. We'll set something up. He started to step back. Hand moving toward the edge of the door, I put my palm flat on the frame. He stopped. We looked at each other. Someone told me Caleb has marks on him, I said. Bruises. On his arms and his neck. Prescott didn't blink. Not once. Who told you that? Doesn't matter. It matters a great deal, actually. The warmth in his voice was still there, but it had hardened underneath like wood with a lacquer coat, smooth on the surface, solid and unyielding beneath. Because whoever told you that is lying to you, Warren. Caleb is fine. Then let me see him. He's asleep. Wake him up. I'm not going to wake my son up at 10 o'clock at night because someone's been filling your head with stories. He tilted his head slightly, like he was genuinely puzzled by me. I understand you worry about him. That's what grandfathers do. But this is my house, and Caleb is my son. I think you need to respect that. He said it the way you say something that has only one correct response. I'm his grandfather, I said, and I'm his father. The smile was gone now. Not replaced by anger, just by nothing. A flat, clean nothing. Good night, Warren. The door closed. That's when I saw him. Second floor window. Curtain pulled back just enough. He was thin, not growing thin, but hollowed out thin. Shoulders drawn up like he'd forgotten how to let them drop. His face was still in a way no 13-year-old's face should be still. Not calm. Careful. The curtain fell back. He was gone, not slammed. That would have been too obvious. Just closed. Firm and final, the latch clicking into place like a period at the end of a sentence. I stood on the front step. 34 years in a classroom, I dealt with parents who lied to my face. I dealt with principals who buried things they didn't want to find. I knew what denial looked like. And I knew what control looked like, and what I'd just seen on Prescott Raines's face was not denial. Denial has heat in it. Confusion. Offense. What he'd had was none of those things. I turned to walk back to my truck. That's when I looked up. Second floor, far left window. The curtain was thin, the kind that diffuses light, but doesn't quite block it. A yellow glow behind it, dim like a nightlight or a lamp turned low, and a shape, small, still, standing just behind the fabric. I stopped walking. The shape didn't move, didn't pull the curtain aside. Just stood there close enough to the window that I could make out the outline of shoulders, of a head, of someone who was not asleep at 9:47 on a school night. Caleb. I raised one hand. Slow. Just a small motion, not a wave, not a signal. Just, I see you. I'm here. The curtain shifted, then closed. I stood in the driveway for another moment. The cul-de-sac was quiet. Sprinklers running somewhere down the block. The smell of cut grass and cold air. I turned toward my truck, and that's when I saw it. The kitchen window, ground floor, left side of the house. Light on, and a figure standing just inside, facing outward. Not Diane. I'd seen Diane's silhouette 1,000 times across 35 years of Sunday dinners and holiday mornings. This wasn't her shape. This wasn't her posture. I stood very still. The figure didn't move, didn't wave. Just stood in the yellow light of the kitchen window looking out at the dark driveway. I got in my truck. I drove 2 blocks, pulled over, sat with both hands on the wheel. It could have been a neighbor. It could have been someone I didn't know. but I knew that silhouette. I had lived with that silhouette for 40 years. I pulled back onto the road and drove home through the dark. And the whole 12 minutes back, I kept asking myself the same question. Not what was she doing there, but how long had she been there, and why hadn't she told me? Tomorrow I needed to talk to someone who actually knew what was happening inside that house. I needed to talk to the boy who'd seen the bruises. I hadn't slept. Not really. I'd lain on my side of the bed and stared at the ceiling while Helen breathed steadily beside me. And somewhere around 3 in the morning, I'd given up and gone to sit in the kitchen with a glass of water and the particular silence that only exists at that hour, the kind that presses in on you and doesn't let you think about anything except the things you don't want to think about. Beverly Marsh had texted at 7:15. "We can meet. Grounds Coffee on Roswell, 8:30. I'll bring Eli." I was there at 8. The cafe was the kind of place that had chalkboard menus and exposed brick and tables too small for anything serious. I took the corner booth, ordered a black coffee I didn't touch, watched the door. They came in at 8:32. Beverly Marsh was 41, practical clothes, no makeup, the kind of tired that doesn't come from one bad night, but from weeks of carrying something. She had her hand on Eli's shoulder, not steering him just there. Eli was 13, same age as Caleb, but he looked younger right now. He had his mother's eyes and a face that hadn't figured out yet how to hide what it was feeling. He slid into the seat across from me, both hands wrapped around the orange juice his mother had ordered him at the counter. He didn't drink it. Beverly sat beside him, gave me a small nod. I looked at the boy. "Eli," I said. "I'm not a cop. You're not making a statement. You don't owe me anything." I kept my voice low, even, the same voice I'd used for 34 years when a student was about to tell me something that mattered. "I just want to know what you saw." Eli looked at his mother. She nodded once. He looked back at me. "The bruises," he said. "On his arm, his left arm right here." He touched his own forearm just below the inside of the elbow, his sleeve rolled up in Jim. I saw them. What did they look like? Yellow and purple on the edges, like they were old but not healed. He paused. "I've had bruises before. From soccer, from falling off my bike. They don't look like that after a couple days. That color that takes longer." Smart kid. He knew what he was looking at. "Did you ask him about it?" "Yeah. Right after gym." Eli's jaw tightened. "He said he fell." "But you didn't believe him." "He said it to the floor." Eli finally looked up at me directly. When Caleb lies, he looks at the floor. I've known him since we were 8. I know when he's lying. I wrapped both hands around my coffee cup. "What else?" I said. Eli hesitated, looked at his orange juice, then at his mother, then back at me. "A few weeks ago," he said slowly, "we were walking home after school. He said something, kind of quiet, like he wasn't sure he should say it." "What did he say?" "He said..." Eli stopped, started again. "Mason told Daddy that I tried to score higher than him on the test. I wasn't trying. I just answered the questions." Eli paused. "Mason is his little brother. Half-brother, I guess. He's 8. I kept my face still. "Go on." That's all he said. He just went quiet after that. Eli set down the orange juice. But the next day he came to school with his hand wrapped up, like with a bandage. And when I asked, he said he jammed his fingers. "Did you believe that one either?" Eli shook his head. I sat with that for a moment. I'm not a man who has visions. I don't dramatize things in my head. But sitting in that corner booth with the morning light coming through the window and a 13-year-old boy telling me what he'd pieced together, something assembled itself in my mind, detail by detail, and I couldn't stop it from forming. Mason, 8 years old, running into the kitchen. Daddy Caleb tried to score higher than me on the test. I don't want him to do that. Prescott setting down his glass, walking across the room. No warning, no build-up. Just the sound of an open hand hitting the side of a boy's face before the boy even understood what was coming. And then the voice, low, not angry, which was somehow worse than angry. Who gave you permission to be better than your brother and Caleb? 13 years old, standing straight. Not crying. Not because he wasn't in pain, but because he'd learned that crying made it worse. I pushed that image down, filed it somewhere I'd have to deal with later. Eli. I looked at the boy across the table. You did the right thing telling your mom. He made me promise not to. Eli's voice cracked slightly on the last word. He said if I told anyone it would get worse for him. I know. Is that true? Will it get worse? I looked at him straight. Not if I get there first. Beverly put her hand over Eli's on the table. I reached for my wallet. Left enough cash on the table to cover all three of us. Thank you, Eli. He looked up. Can you actually help him? Like, are you actually going to be able to do something? I stood up. I'm going to try. I walked out into the October morning. Cold air, gray sky, the smell of somebody's breakfast from the diner 2 doors down. And then I remembered. February. The middle of winter, but that wasn't why it stopped me. What stopped me was the image of Caleb at Diane's birthday dinner, wearing a long-sleeved thermal shirt underneath his regular shirt, in a house with the heat running. I'd noticed it. I'd thought kids wear strange things, who knows why, and I'd moved on to the next conversation. He hadn't been cold. He'd been covering something up. 8 months ago, I stood on the sidewalk outside Grounds Coffee on Roswell Road and understood with a clarity that made my stomach turn that I had looked directly at a sign and chosen the easy explanation. There was still one more thing I needed to know where the bruises had been officially recorded. Because according to Eli, someone at that school had noticed before he did. A teacher, someone who asked questions, someone whose report had apparently gone nowhere. I needed to find that person before anyone else made it disappear. Wednesday afternoon, October 15th, 2024. Harwell Middle School, Marietta, Georgia. I'd driven past Harwell Middle School 100 times since I retired. Never stopped. There's something strange about going back to a place you spent 20 years of your life. The hallways look smaller. The ceilings lower, the whole building somehow reduced. Like the memory of it was bigger than the actual thing. I pulled into the faculty lot out of habit, parked in the spot I'd used for 2 decades, and sat there for a moment before getting out. The front office smelled the same. Floor wax and copy paper, and the faint ghost of cafeteria food. Some things don't change regardless of how many years pass. Warren Beckett. The receptionist, young woman I didn't recognize, looked up from her desk. Principal Aldridge said you might be coming by. I hadn't called ahead. I hadn't told anyone I was coming. I kept my face neutral. He did. Go right in. Principal Gerald Aldridge was 63 years old, heavy-set, with the kind of white hair that made him look distinguished in a school photograph and exhausted in person. We'd worked together for 11 years before I retired. He was a good man, careful, institutional, the kind of administrator who believed in doing things the right way and suffered greatly whenever the right way turned out to be inconvenient. He was standing when I came in. That told me something. Warren. He shook my hand, held it a beat longer than usual. Sit down. You knew I was coming. I had a feeling. He settled into his chair, laced his fingers on the desk. What do you need? Ordination. I need to know if there are any reports on file for a student named Caleb Rains, 13 years old, 7th grade. Aldridge's expression didn't change, but something behind it did. Rains, son of Diane Beckett, my daughter. He turned to his computer, typed slowly. The kind of slow that isn't about typing speed. Nothing in the system, he said. No reports under that name. Nothing at all, nothing. I leaned forward. Gerald. Nothing there because there's nothing to find, or nothing there because someone made sure it wasn't there. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he picked up his phone and pressed 2 buttons. Tom, can you come to my office right now? Coach Tom Delaney was 38, lean crew, cut the look of a man who took his job seriously and didn't sleep well when things went wrong. He came in, saw me, and I watched something shift in his face. Not surprise. Something closer to relief. This is Warren Beckett, Aldridge said. Caleb Rains is his grandson. Delaney sat down without being asked. I filed 2 reports, he said. Straight out, no preamble. April and August. I noticed bruising on the boy's upper arms during a fitness assessment, the kind you don't get from normal activity. Both times I documented it. Both times I submitted the paperwork to the front office. To who specifically? I asked. Donna Stiles, administrative coordinator. She handles all intake paperwork. And then Delaney's jaw tightened. And then nothing. No follow-up from DFCS. No call from anyone. I checked back in September. Donna said she'd forwarded everything through proper channels. He paused. See, I should have pushed harder. I know that. You filed the report, I said. That's what the law required you to do. It required me to make sure it got somewhere. I didn't do that. Aldridge had his computer open again. His face had gone carefully blank, the face of a man discovering something he wasn't going to enjoy discovering. Donna Stiles, he said quietly. Her husband is listed in our vendor records, Rains Property Group. The name sat in the room. Prescott Rains, I said. Aldridge nodded once. He sponsors 2 school programs through that company. Has for the past 2 years. I stood up. I need to see your archive room. Old disciplinary records. Warren. Gerald. I looked at him. 20 years. I never asked you for anything I shouldn't have. I'm asking now. He held my gaze for 3 full seconds. Then he stood up and reached for his keys. The archive room was in the basement, metal shelving manila folders, organized by year, the smell of old paper and time. Aldridge left me alone with it after showing me the section I needed. I found the file in 11 minutes. Rains Prescott A. Disciplinary File. Harwell High School expelled March 12, 1999. Reason: aggravated assault. A classmate had been hospitalized, 2 broken ribs, a concussion bruising consistent with repeated blows. The victim's family had declined a psychological evaluation of Prescott. No criminal charges were pursued. Case closed. He would have been 16 years old. I turned the page. The incident report. The witness statements. The photograph of the victim's injuries paper-clipped to the back. I didn't look at that long. What I looked at was the parent contact section. There was a name listed as the family liaison, the person who had negotiated Prescott's exit from the school, quietly, without police involvement, without the evaluation the counselors had recommended. I read the name. I read it again. I knew it. I stood in that basement under the fluorescent lights and tried to remember where I knew it from, and the longer I stood there, the colder I got. I folded the file carefully and went back upstairs. Aldridge was waiting in the hallway. "Find what you needed, more than I was looking for." I held up the folder. "I need to borrow this." He looked at it, at me. "Warren, if this goes somewhere official..." "It will. That's the point." He nodded, stepped aside. I walked out through the front office past the receptionist, who'd been told I was coming before I arrived out into the October afternoon, and sat in my truck with the folder on the passenger seat and a name in my head that I couldn't yet place, but couldn't let go of. That night, my phone rang. A woman's voice. Soft, a little hesitant. "Mr. Beckett. My name is Patricia Lund. I teach English at Harwell Middle. I heard you were here today asking about Caleb Rains." A pause. "I have something you need to read. Can we meet tomorrow morning?" Thursday morning, October 16th, 2024. Harwell Middle School, Marietta, Georgia. The teacher's lounge at Harwell Middle hadn't changed much. Same vending machine in the corner that never had what you wanted. Same round table with the wobbly leg that nobody had fixed in 20 years. Same smell of burnt coffee and dry erase markers that I'd associated with every working morning of my adult life. Ms. Patricia Lund was already there when I arrived. 40 years old, dark hair pulled back the kind of composed that takes effort to maintain. She was sitting at the table with a white envelope in front of her, and both hands flat on the surface like she was holding it down. She stood when she saw me. "Mr. Beckett, thank you for coming. Moitsuka, you said you had something I needed to read." "Yes." She looked at the envelope, then at me. "Before I give this to you, I want to explain." "Sit down," I said. "Take your time." We both sat. She kept her hands on the envelope. "I assigned this essay in September," she said. Prompt was simple, "A place I feel safe." 2 pages, seine Sozen, handwritten, personal. I use it every year at the start of the semester. It tells me more about my students in 2 pages than 3 months of classroom observation. And Caleb turned one in, so every student did. But Caleb's, she stopped, chose her next words carefully. I read it twice the night I collected them. Then I put it in my desk drawer instead of the class folder. I don't have a clean explanation for why. It didn't feel right to file it with the others. What did it feel like? She looked at me steadily. It felt like something I might need later. I held out my hand. She slid the envelope across the table. The handwriting was small and even slightly right-leaning. The kind of handwriting that comes from a kid who was taught to write carefully and kept the habit. I recognized something in it, the handwriting of a boy who took things seriously. I read the first line. "I used to feel safe in my room. I kept going. Then the lock changed. I don't know when exactly. I just noticed one day that it locked from the outside now." I didn't say anything about it because I didn't know what to say. I stopped. Read that again. Locked from the outside. I set the page down flat on the table, pressed my fingers against it, like I could hold the words still. "Keep reading," Ms. Lund said quietly. I picked it back up. I tried to be quiet. I figured if I was quiet enough, if I was careful enough, if I just didn't make him notice me, it would stop. Or at least slow down. I got good at being quiet. I got good at a lot of things I didn't want to get good at. That's when it hit me. Not the words themselves, but the space between them. A 13-year-old boy sitting at a desk in a 7th grade English class, writing the only version of the truth he knew how to put on paper. And I thought about what quiet looked like in that house. I thought about Caleb at his desk, pencil moving homework spread out in front of him. Mason pushing the door open without knocking. That particular 8-year-old voice, bright, performative, already practiced. On got a perfect score on the math test. "I'm going to tell Daddy," Caleb setting his pencil down, not arguing, not explaining, just setting the pencil down and waiting. The footsteps coming up the stairs. Slow and deliberate. The kind of pace that isn't in a hurry because it doesn't need to be. The door opening. I stopped building the image there. I'd learned enough from task 3 to know how it ended. I didn't need to construct the rest of it. I folded the page back along its crease. "What's the last line?" I asked. I didn't look up. Ms. Lund didn't reach for the paper. She already had it memorized. "Home is where no one checks if the door is locked from the outside." The vending machine hummed in the corner. Outside the window, a group of kids crossed the courtyard with backpacks on, laughing about something. Neither of us spoke for a moment. "I should have reported this in September," Ms. Lund said. Her voice was steady but thin at the edges. I had a reason to. I had enough. I talked myself out of it. I told myself it was metaphorical. That kids write dark things, and it doesn't always mean Ms. Lund. She stopped. "You called me last night," I said. "You're talking to me right now. You're handing me the only direct record we have of what that boy tried to say." I looked at her. "You're reporting it now." She exhaled, nodded once. I stood up, tucked the envelope under my arm. "Keep the original in your desk. Locked. Don't make copies. Don't tell anyone you gave me this. And if anyone from the administrative office asks whether you've spoken to me, you haven't." She looked at me for a moment. "Is this going somewhere?" "Yes," I said. "It is. I called him from the parking lot." 2 rings. "Yeah." Clifford Tanner, 65, retired county investigator turned private. The kind of man who answered the phone like he'd been expecting bad news. "Cliff, it's Warren." "I know who it is. What do you need?" "I need you to pull everything you can find on a man named Prescott Rains. Finances, business records, property holdings, anything public record. Rains Property Group is one company, there may be others." A pause. "How fast?" "Yesterday." Another pause, longer. "I'll call you." I got in my truck and sat for a minute with Caleb's essay on the passenger seat and the name from the 1999 disciplinary file still sitting in the back of my mind like a splinter I couldn't reach. I'd think about that tonight. After I got home. After I watched Helen pick up her phone and hold it a little too long after I told her I'd been dealing with old work business. After I noticed for the first time clearly that she didn't ask a single follow-up question. She never used to let me off that easy. The house smelled like garlic and red wine when I walked in. Helen was at the stove. Pasta salad already on the table, 2 glasses poured. She looked up when she heard the door and smiled easy, familiar, the smile of a woman who had no reason to be nervous about anything. "You look exhausted," she said. "Long day." "Sit down, it's almost ready." I hung up my jacket, washed my hands, watched her move around the kitchen the way I'd watched her 10,000 times, efficient, unhurried, completely at ease. I sat down. She set the pasta in front of me and settled across the table. "So what kept you?" she asked. "Went by the school, saw Aldridge, talked to one of the teachers." "Which teacher?" "Patricia Lund, English department." Helen reached for her wine. "I don't think I know her. She's been there 6 years." I turned my fork in the pasta. She had some things to say about Caleb. A pause, small, controlled. "What kind of things?" "An essay he wrote, about feeling safe at home." I looked up. "Or not feeling safe." Helen set her glass down, met my eyes across the table. Her expression was steady, the kind of steady that doesn't shift even when it should. "Warren." Her voice was patient, careful. You're reading too much into a school assignment. Kids dramatize everything at that age. He wrote that home is where no one checks if the door is locked from the outside. Nothing. Not a flinch. Not even the slightest tightening around her eyes. He's 13, she said. They're all dramatic at 13. You taught enough of them to know that. She picked up her fork and started eating again. That's when I understood something I hadn't let myself understand before. In 40 years of marriage, Helen had never heard me say something's wrong with one of the kids and responded with anything less than 4 follow-up questions. She scheduled appointments. She made phone calls. She showed up before anyone asked her to. Tonight I'd told her Caleb wrote an essay about not feeling safe, and she'd called it dramatic. She already knew. That's the only explanation that made sense. She already knew, and she'd decided it wasn't her problem to fix. I didn't push it. We finished dinner. I helped clear the table. We watched an hour of television. She fell asleep on the sofa with her book open on her chest, the way she always did, and I turned off the lamp and went to bed. I didn't sleep. Somewhere around midnight, I got up quietly and went to the armchair in the living room. The streetlight made a long rectangle across the floor through the gap in the curtains. I picked up my phone and scrolled to a number I almost never called. It rang twice. Dad, Carol's voice alert, not sleepy, past midnight in Portland. She'd been awake. Hey, kiddo. You don't call at midnight unless something's wrong. What happened? So I told her. All of it. Beverly's call. Eli's bruises. Coach Delaney's 2 buried reports blocked by Donna Stiles, whose husband was connected to Rain's property group. The essay. Home is where no one checks if the door is locked from the outside. Carol didn't interrupt once. When I finished, the line was quiet. I'm coming home, Ba. You don't have to. I'm coming home. The same voice she'd had at 9 years old when she'd made up her mind. I'll get a flight Sunday. I'll tell the department it's a family emergency. I never trusted him. She said it flat and clean, like reading a fact off a page. First time I met Prescott, he looked at Diane the way you look at something you've already decided to keep. Not love, calculation. A pause. I should have said something then. And we all should have, I said. That seems to be the theme of this week. She told me to call her tomorrow. I promised. After we hung up, I sat in the dark for a while longer. That's when I heard it. From the bedroom, Helen's voice. Low, unhurried, the voice of someone conducting ordinary business. Not the confused murmur of someone half asleep. Deliberate. Measured. I checked my watch. 1:14 a.m. I sat perfectly still and listened to the rhythm of it. I couldn't make out words, only cadence, question, answer, question. A report being delivered. That's what it sounded like. Not a conversation between 2 people catching up. Something structured, purposeful. She didn't sound afraid. She didn't sound conflicted. She sounded like a woman completing a task she'd done before. I didn't open the door, not because I was afraid of what I'd hear, because I needed more of the picture before I could use it. You don't show your hand before you've counted your cards. 34 years in a classroom taught me that much. I went back to the armchair and waited out the dark. At 6:15, Helen came to the kitchen. Coffee maker cabinet, refrigerator, the usual sounds. I came downstairs 2 minutes later like I'd just woken up. She was standing at the counter with her back to me. Her phone lit up on the counter beside her. I read the screen before she turned around. Not a name, just a Georgia number. And below it 3 words of a message before the screen went dark. She turned, saw me in the doorway, smiled. Morning. She reached for her phone without glancing at it, slid it into her pocket. Coffee's almost ready. Thanks, I said. I sat at the kitchen table. She poured 2 cups and set one in front of me. We didn't talk. She looked perfectly comfortable with the silence. That was the part that stayed with me, not the phone call at 1 a.m., not the message she'd pocketed. The comfort, the absolute ease of a woman who had nothing to hide because she'd already decided she'd done nothing wrong. At 7:43, my phone buzzed. Clifford Tanner. I stepped out to the back porch, a Warren. His voice was tight with something he'd found. I've got Prescott Raines's financials, all of it. A pause that felt deliberate. You need to come in today. This is not a phone conversation. I looked back through the kitchen window. Helen was rinsing her cup at the sink, unhurried, humming something quiet. I'll be there in an hour, I said. Friday morning, October 17th, 2024. Buckhead, Atlanta, Georgia. Buckhead was 40 minutes from Marietta on a Friday morning with traffic on I-75. I took surface streets. I needed the time to think. Clifford Tanner's office was on the second floor of a narrow building on Peachtree Road, sandwiched between a dry cleaner and an insurance agency. No sign on the door, just a suite number and a buzzer. I'd been here twice before, once 15 years ago, when he helped me track down a former student who'd gone missing, and once 6 years ago, when I needed someone I trusted to run a background check quietly. Tanner opened the door before I knocked. You made good time, he said. I left early. His office looked exactly like it always had: filing cabinets along one wall, a desk buried under paper, a coffee maker on a side table that had clearly been running since before dawn. The blinds were half open. City light cut across the floor in long strips. Tanner was 65, gray-haired, with the kind of face that had stopped being surprised by things a long time ago. He was wearing a blue Oxford shirt that needed ironing and didn't care about it. He pointed at the chair across from his desk. I sat. He sat. He opened a folder. Prescott Allen Raines, he said. 42 years old. Looks good on paper, nice house, nice car, good clothes, LinkedIn profile that says he runs a property investment company. He tapped the folder. Now let me tell you what's actually going on. How bad? I $380,000 in the hole. He laid a printed sheet in front of me. Numbers, dates, creditor names. 2 bank loans, 1 personal one through the business. Combined balance just under $200,000. Private lender, 1 individual, no institutional backing, another 90. And there's a civil lawsuit pending from a former business partner. That one alone is for $110,000. I looked at the sheet. The car he drives? Tanner continued. Leased. Lease expires in 3 months and he hasn't indicated renewal. The house on Pace's Ferry. He pulled out a second page. By mortgaged at 92% of appraised value. He's been making minimum payments. Miss one, just one, and the bank starts foreclosure proceedings. He looks like money, I said. Hi, he spends like money. Different thing entirely. Tanner leaned back. He's been using the property company as a shell, moving small amounts around to look liquid. But there's nothing real behind it. The company hasn't closed a deal in 14 months. I set the sheet down. Does he know about my retirement account? I asked. Tanner looked at me. Does Diane know about it? Yes, we talked about it when she and Prescott got engaged. Estate planning, she's in the will. Then Prescott knows. He said it flatly, the way you state a fact that doesn't need commentary. How much are we talking? I looked at the wall for a moment. 420,000. Tanner didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The math was obvious. A man $400,000 underwater. Married to the daughter of a man with $400,000 in retirement savings living 40 minutes away. He married Diane for the money, I said. Partly. Tanner turned another page. But it's not just that. A man like this, he needs cover. He needs to look normal, settled. A wife, a family, a father-in-law who taught school for 34 years and goes to church on Sundays. He looked up. Nobody looks twice at a man whose wife's family looks like yours. He used Diane as a facade. Ma, he used all of you. Tanner said it without heat, just an observation. The house, the family dinners, the good name, all of it buys him time. Time to keep the creditors off. Time to find a way out. Time to get his hands on what he actually came for. I sat with that. 34 years teaching other people's children. Sunday dinners and holidays, and a family that looked from the outside exactly like what it was supposed to be. And somewhere in the middle of it, a man had done the math and decided we were useful. I need more than financial records, I said. I need something I can take to the DA's office, something that connects the money to what's happening to Caleb. I know. Tanner closed the folder. I'm still pulling threads. He paused. But Warren, he stopped. What? I said. He looked at me, the way an old friend looks at you when they're trying to figure out how much you can handle. The threads I'm pulling, some of them, aren't leading where I expected. He chose his words slowly. I want to be sure before I say anything. But you need to be prepared for the possibility that this goes wider than Prescott. I held his gaze. How much wider? He looked down at the folder, picked up his pen, set it back down. I'll call you, he said. I was almost to my truck when my phone rang. Diane. I stopped walking, looked at the screen, then answered. Bah! Her voice was warm, easy. Nothing in it. Just calling to check in. Haven't heard from you in a few days. I've been busy. Everything okay? Fine. How's Caleb? He's good. Little quiet lately, but you know how he gets. A small laugh. Actually, we were thinking this Sunday, maybe you and Mama could come for dinner. Nothing fancy. Prescott was just saying he feels like we haven't seen you two in a while. Prescott was just saying. Sure, I said. We'll be there. Great. 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock. We said goodbye. I stood in the parking lot on Peachtree Road and stared at my phone for a moment after the call ended. In 40 years, Diane had never once told me what Prescott was just saying. I got in the truck. Sunday dinner, 6 o'clock. I wasn't going because I was hungry. I pulled up to the house at 4 o'clock. Same cul-de-sac. Same brick facade and iron lanterns. Same fall wreath on the door, still perfectly symmetrical. Prescott's car wasn't in the driveway. I sat in the truck for a moment and registered that small fact before getting out. Diane answered the door. She was wearing a gray cardigan and no jewelry, which was unusual for her. Her eyes were slightly pink at the edges, the kind that comes from crying that happened an hour ago, not right now. She smiled when she saw me. The smile was real. That made it worse somehow. Bah. She stepped aside to let me in. He's at a meeting. Should be back by 6. That's fine, I said. I just came to see everyone. She led me into the kitchen. The house was immaculate, not clean the way a house gets when you tidy up for company, but the other kind. Surfaces bare, couch pillows aligned, the kind of clean that takes work to maintain or fear. Caleb was at the kitchen table with his textbooks open. He looked up when I walked in. He didn't smile. He just looked at me with those careful, steady eyes that had learned somewhere along the way not to show too much. Hey, Caleb. Hi, Grandpa. What are you working on? Math. Any good? A pause. It's okay. I sat down across from him. Diane brought out sweet tea without asking. She'd been making it for me since she was 12 years old. The three of us sat in a version of a normal afternoon. Diane asked about the garden. I asked about school. Caleb answered in short, complete sentences like a boy who'd been taught that giving short answers was safer than long ones. But the whole time I watched him, his eyes kept going to the staircase. Not constantly, just quick checks. The way a person glances at a door they're not sure will stay closed. Then Mason came down. 8 years old, hair combed, perfectly flat white polo shirt without a wrinkle. He came around the corner and hit me with a grin that showed every tooth. "Grandpa Warren?" He threw his arms out and ran at me. I caught him. He was warm and solid and full of energy the way 8-year-olds are. I held him for a moment and patted his back and set him down. He turned to the table. His eyes found Caleb. Something passed across his face, quick, controlled, gone before most people would have caught it. But I'd spent 34 years reading faces across a classroom. I caught it. He moved to the kitchen counter, reached up toward the shelf above the coffee maker. His hand closed around a blue ceramic mug. I recognized it in the same instant. I felt my stomach drop. Helen's birthday mug, the one Diane had given her 20 years ago, when she was 15 and saved up for it herself. Diane kept it here because she used it every morning. Mason's hand gave it the smallest push. It fell, hit the tile floor, shattered into 4 clean pieces. Mason spun around. His face collapsed into tears so fast it was like flipping a switch. "Caleb," his voice cracked with it. "You pushed it. I saw you reach up there." Caleb didn't move, didn't flinch, just looked at his brother with those same steady eyes. "I didn't touch it." "You did, you were right next to me." "Mason." Caleb's voice was flat and exhausted. I was sitting down. Diane was already moving, crouching to collect the pieces. She looked at Caleb. Something in her expression, not accusation exactly, but not disbelief either. The expression of a woman who had learned it was easier not to determine fault. "Caleb, Mom, I didn't touch it. I was at the table." "I saw him," Mason said. Still crying, perfectly pitched. He was right there. I stood up, started to say something. The front door opened. Prescott walked in. He stopped in the doorway of the kitchen, took in the room in one sweep, the broken mug on the floor, Diane on her knees collecting it, Mason crying, Caleb sitting with his hands flat on the table. I stepped back, put the kitchen column between myself and the center of the room. I don't know why I did it. Instinct, maybe. The same instinct that made me stay quiet in a principal's office 30 years ago when a student was about to say something important. Prescott didn't see me. He walked to the center of the kitchen. Didn't look at Mason. Didn't ask what happened. His eyes went to Caleb and stayed there. "Stand up." Caleb stood up. Prescott crossed the room in 4 steps and hit him open-handed across the face. Hard enough that Caleb stumbled sideways into the table edge. Hard enough that I heard it from where I was standing. How many times? Not a question, a recitation. Low, and even the way a man talks when he's done being surprised by his own anger. How many times have I told you, you do not break things in this house? I didn't. Close your mouth. Caleb closed his mouth. He was standing slightly sideways now, one hand braced on the table, face turned away. He didn't cry. He didn't argue. He just waited with the patience of a boy who had learned that waiting was the fastest way through. Diane was still on her knees. She didn't look up. Mason had stopped crying. I stepped out from behind the column. Prescott turned, saw me. His face didn't change, not a flicker, not a trace of embarrassment or alarm. Just a brief recalibration, the way a man adjusts when he realizes someone walked in on something he didn't intend to share. Warren. His voice was even. I didn't realize you were still here. I looked at him. I know you didn't. I picked up my jacket from the back of the chair, set my glass on the counter, walked to the front door without another word. Outside, I went to my truck, opened the door, stopped. I looked up at the second-floor window. Far left. Caleb was there. Same window as the first night. Same position just behind the curtain, one hand holding the fabric slightly aside. But this time he didn't close it. He just stood there and looked at me. And I looked back at him. Then I got in the truck and called Tanner before I'd even started the engine. I just watched Prescott hit Caleb. In front of Diane. In front of me. My voice came out steadier than I felt. Geez, I need whatever you have. Right now. Tanner was quiet for 3 seconds. Warren, he said, I found something. About Prescott before Diane, before Atlanta. You need to hear this in person. Tanner had the map already spread out when I walked in. 2 cities marked in red pen, Nashville and Atlanta, a line drawn between them with a ruler straight and deliberate. Beside the map, 2 folders side by side, like he'd been waiting for me to come in and sit down so he could present them in order. I sat down. He didn't offer coffee this time. Before Diane, he said, Prescott was married to someone else. Nashville, Tennessee, 2017. He opened the first folder. Name is Kevin Slade, 36 at the time, working in logistics. Had a son from a previous relationship, 9 years old when Prescott came into the picture. What happened? Married in March 2017. Divorced in November 2019. No public filing of any complaints. No police reports. No restraining orders. Tanner looked up. Kevin Slade just stopped existing in Nashville. Moved, changed jobs, went quiet. His son would have been 11 when they left. Prescott had something on him. That's my read. I don't know what yet. But Slade didn't just leave, he disappeared quietly, which means he had a reason to stay quiet. Tanner tapped the second folder. Now here's what matters. Look at the selection. Slade was a single-parent limited support network recently out of a difficult custody situation with his ex. Then Diane's single mother son from a previous marriage. Family that looks stable but isn't paying close attention. He paused. Prescott doesn't pick randomly. He picks people who need something, people who have a child already in the house and not enough armor around them. I looked at the 2 names on the folders. Nashville, Atlanta. You find Slade? I asked. He's in Alpharetta now. Works at a distribution warehouse off Haynesbridge Road. I have an address. I stood up before he finished the sentence. Let's go. The warehouse district in Alpharetta was 40 minutes north. We drove mostly in silence. I watched the city thin out and the subdivisions take over, and thought about a man I'd never met who had packed up his life and his son and driven south to get away from something he couldn't name in court. Kevin Slade was waiting for us outside the warehouse break room. 38 years old, but he looked older, thin, in the way that comes from years of carrying weight that doesn't show on the outside, hair gone gray at the temples well before its time. He shook my hand without making eye contact. We found a corner table in the break room. Tanner stayed by the door. I don't want trouble, Slade said. First thing, before I'd opened my mouth. I'm not bringing any, I said. I'm a 67-year-old retired school teacher from Marietta. I drove up here because my 13-year-old grandson is living in the same house Prescott Rains is living in. Slade looked at the table. How old? He asked. 13. A muscle in his jaw moved. My boy is 11 now. He doesn't mention Prescott's name anymore. Hasn't in 2 years. He said it like that was a good thing and a terrible thing at the same time. What did Prescott do to your son? I asked. The break room hummed. Fluorescent light above us. Someone outside laughing at something. Slade was quiet for a long moment. Things no child should have to know how to survive. He said it to the table. Then he said it again, slower, like he needed to hear it himself. The things that took my boy a long time to understand weren't his fault. Do you have any documentation? Anything you kept? I have photographs, medical records from one ER visit. I told them he fell on the stairs. I believed it when I said it. His voice went flat and thin. I know better now. I have the records, and I have 3 letters Prescott wrote to my boy directly. I kept everything. Why haven't you used it? He looked at me then. First time since we sat down. Because I was scared, he said. Because Prescott told me things about myself that he said he'd make public. And because my son asked me not to. He held my gaze. He said he just wanted it to be over. I understand that, I said. I do. But there's a boy in Atlanta right now who's in the same position your son was in. And if what you have adds to what I have, what do you have? An eyewitness account, a buried school report, a 13-year-old's essay about a door that locks from the outside. I stopped, and I watched Prescott hit Caleb across the face yesterday afternoon. Slade looked at his hands. You can use what I have, he said finally, on one condition. Name it. My son's name does not appear in that courtroom, not in the filing, not in testimony, not in any document that becomes public record. He looked at me straight. He's 11 years old. He doesn't get to be evidence. I'll make sure of it, I said. You have my word. He nodded once, slow and final like a door closing. We shook hands again. This time he looked me in the eye. On the drive back, I stared at the highway and let Tanner do the talking for a while. That's at least 2, he said. Probably more we haven't found. 2 that we know of, I said. But Kevin's documentation alone won't be enough for a conviction. A good defense attorney frames it as a pattern of accusation, not a pattern of behavior. So what do you need? I need Prescott to make a mistake on record. Something current. Something where I'm not the only one who saw it. I looked out the window. I watched him hit Caleb yesterday. That's one witness. I need more than me. Tanner nodded slowly. I'll keep pulling. My phone buzzed on the center console. Text message. Number I didn't have saved. Mr. Beckett. I think I have something you need to see. Would you be able to come by Roy Fenton, your daughter's neighbor? I read it twice. A neighbor. Reaching out on his own. Nobody reaches out on their own unless they've seen enough that staying quiet has started to feel like a choice they can't live with. I typed back, tomorrow morning, what time works? His reply came in under a minute. Whenever you're ready. Roy Fenton was already outside when I pulled up. He was trimming the hedge along his front walk with a pair of hand clippers, working slowly and methodically, the way a man does when he's been up since 5 and needed something to do with his hands. He was wearing a canvas jacket and work boots, and he looked exactly like what he was. A man who'd lived in the same house for 12 years and knew every inch of this street by heart. He saw my truck and set the clippers down on the porch railing. Mr. Beckett, he said, thanks for coming. Roy. We shook hands. His grip was firm, the grip of someone who meant what he said and didn't waste motion. I appreciate you reaching out, He held the door open. "Come on in." The living room was neat and modest. A recliner, a couch, a bookshelf with paperbacks and a few framed photos. A golden retriever lifted its head from a dog bed in the corner, assessed me, and went back to sleep. Roy led me to the kitchen table and set a laptop on it that had clearly been sitting there waiting. "You want coffee?" "I'm fine, thank you." He sat down across from me, put both hands flat on the table. "I want to say something first," he said, "before I show you this, so go ahead. I've lived on this street since 2012. Watched that family move in 3 years ago. Watched that boy grow up." He paused. "I don't involve myself in other people's business. That's not my nature. But I kept coming back to this clip, and I kept thinking, if somebody has something and they sit on it, that's a choice. I didn't want to make that choice anymore." I looked at him. "I understand." He turned the laptop toward me and pressed play. The footage was from a dashboard camera mounted on Roy's truck angled toward the street. The timestamp in the corner read 6:47 p.m. June 3, 2024. The image was slightly grainy, the resolution you get from a mid-range dashcam in evening light, but clear enough. More than clear enough. Prescott came out of the house first, then Caleb, a step behind, moving slowly. Not the slow of a kid dragging his feet, the slow of a boy trying to take up as little space as possible. Prescott closed the gap between them in 2 strides. His right hand came out, not a swing, not a raised arm, just a reach, and his thumb pressed into the soft tissue just below Caleb's left shoulder. Not a grip. A point of pressure deliberate and precise. Caleb's step broke. His weight shifted sideways. Then Prescott's palm flattened against Caleb's back and pushed. Not hard enough to knock him down, just hard enough to move him. Just hard enough to communicate something that didn't need words. The front door closed behind them. 23 seconds. I sat there. "Play it again," I said. Roy played it again. I watched Prescott's hand, the way the thumb found the exact same spot, not searching, not accidental, the practiced location of someone who knew where it would hurt without leaving a mark. "One more time," I said. He played it a third time. Neither of us spoke. When the screen went still, I sat back. "How long have you had this?" I asked. "Since June. I was reviewing my dashcam footage after a fender bender on the street. Nothing serious, just checking what I'd captured. I found this clip while I was going through the dates." He kept his eyes on the laptop. "I backed it up to an external drive that same night. Something about it, I couldn't let it go." "You watched it and kept it for 4 months. I watched it and didn't know what to do with it for 4 months, he corrected. "Then I saw you standing outside their door last week, late at night, and I thought that man is looking for the same thing I've been sitting on. Can you send me the file, already on a thumb drive?" He slid it across the table. And I made 2 more copies, one in my safe, one with my brother in Roswell. I picked up the drive, looked at it. Roy. I set it back down. "Would you be willing to testify to what you saw, to the footage, to how it was captured, to the fact that you backed it up immediately and kept it unaltered?" He didn't hesitate. "I've lived here 12 years, he said. "I watched that boy kick a soccer ball in the driveway when he was 10 years old. I watched him stop going outside." He looked at me steadily. "Tell me when and where. I'll be there." I reached across the table and shook his hand. There wasn't much else to say. We both knew it. I was 2 blocks from Roy's house when my phone rang. Tanner. "How'd it go?" he asked. "Better than I expected. Roy's got 23 seconds of Prescott that no defense attorney is going to be able to explain away. He'll testify." "Good." A pause. Not the pause of someone waiting to respond, the pause of someone deciding how to begin. Warren, I need you to come back here. I kept driving. What did you find? Not on the phone. Cliff, it's about Helen. His voice was careful, even, the voice of a man delivering something he wishes he hadn't found. I've been pulling the thread you gave me the name from the 1999 file. It led somewhere I wasn't expecting. Another pause. You need to come here before you go home tonight. I pulled over, turned off the radio. Outside the window, the October leaves were coming down in slow spirals, orange and brown and gold, the kind of afternoon that looks like nothing bad could happen in it. I'll be there in 20 minutes, I said, before I show you the call log that broke this family open comment, still here. So I know you're with me, because once you see this, you can't unsee it. Quick note, this story contains fictional elements crafted for educational and emotional purposes. If that's not something you want to continue with, this is a good place to stop. Tanner's office was on the second floor of a building off Peachtree Road that had seen better decades. The elevator was out again. I took the stairs. He was already at his desk when I walked in. A manila folder open in front of him, reading glasses pushed down his nose. He didn't look up right away. Close the door, he said. I closed it. Sit down, Warren. I sat. He turned the folder around and slid it across the desk. I looked at it, call logs printed on plain paper. 2 columns. Timestamps on the left. A number on the right. Recognize that number? He asked. I looked at it for a long moment. Georgia area code. Local prefix. The same format as the number I'd seen flash across Helen's phone counter at 6:15 that morning, the one she'd pocketed before I could finish reading it. Where did you get this? I said. Prescott's phone records, subpoenaed through the civil matter. Tanner took his glasses off. That number appears 7 times in the last 3 weeks, always within 2 hours of a conversation you had with Helen. I counted the dates down the left column. October 14th, 9:12 p.m., the night Beverly called me. October 15th, 11:45 p.m., October 16th, 1:14 a.m., October 17th, 8:03 a.m. 20 minutes after Tanner had called me about Prescott's financials. I set the folder down. She was reporting to him, I said. Not a question. Every time you moved, he knew about it. Tanner leaned back. The visit to Aldridge, Coach Delaney, Patricia Lund, Roy Fenton. He paused. He knew you were building something. So he moved first. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it. How long? I said. The logs go back 14 months. That's as far as the subpoena covered. 14 months. I'd been sitting at the same breakfast table with her for 14 months, telling her about my days, and she'd been filing reports. My phone buzzed again. I pulled it out. Unknown number. Georgia area code. Warren Beckett. The voice was flat, official, rehearsed. Speaking. This is Detective Carlton Briggs, Cobb County Police Department. I need you to come in this afternoon regarding a complaint filed against you. I looked at Tanner. He was already watching me. What kind of complaint? I said. A protective order application, filed this morning by Prescott Allen Rains. He's alleging harassment, unauthorized contact, and intimidation toward himself and his minor child. A pause. You can come in voluntarily, Mr. Beckett, or I can make it less convenient for you. I gave him the address, told him 30 minutes, hung up. He filed a TPO, I said. Tanner didn't look surprised. I know. He filed it at 9 this morning. I've been waiting to see how long before they called you. You knew this morning. Degree. I knew the moment Roy Fenton handed you that thumb drive yesterday, Prescott's next move was the courts. He stood up. I'm coming with you. Cobb County Police Department was on Floyd Road, a squat brick building with not enough parking and fluorescent lighting that made everyone look vaguely ill. Briggs met us in a side room, 49 years old, gray at the temples, the particular kind of unhurried that comes from having already made up his mind. Mr. Beckett. He set a folder on the table. Prescott Rains filed this morning. He states you appeared uninvited at his residence on October 19th, approached his minor child, and have made repeated attempts to interfere with his custody arrangements. I was invited to dinner, I said. He disputes that. My daughter invited me. She lives in that house. Briggs made a note. He's also filed a supplemental statement indicating you've been conducting what he calls a campaign of intimidation, speaking to school staff neighbors, obtaining records about his personal finances. I spoke to his son's teachers and neighbors. I didn't obtain anything that wasn't public record. Mr. Beckett. Briggs folded his hands on the table. I'm not here to adjudicate. I'm here to inform you that a temporary no-contact order has been issued pending a hearing. You are to have no contact with Prescott Rains, his residence, or, he looked at the paper, Caleb Rains, until the hearing date. The room went quiet. Caleb is my grandson, I said. I understand that. The order stands until the hearing. I looked at Tanner. He gave me the smallest shake of his head. Not here. Not now. I signed the acknowledgement form, stood up, walked out. In the parking lot, the evening air hit me cold. I stood next to Tanner's car and didn't say anything for a full minute. He's cutting off access, I finally said. Before the hearing. That's the point. It buys him time. Tanner unlocked the car. But it also means he's scared. You don't file a TPO against a 67-year-old retired teacher unless you're scared of what he's found. I got in, stared through the windshield at the parking lot, lights coming on in the early dark. Helen called him at 1:14 a.m. the night I heard her, I said. 14 months of calls. She wasn't coerced, Cliff. She chose this. Tanner was quiet for a moment. There's something else, he said. A woman named Agnes Whitfield reached out to me today. She was a nurse, same hospital as Helen 12 years ago. He started the engine. She wants to talk. I looked at him. And Carol called me this morning, he added. Your daughter. She found something on Helen's phone last night. He pulled out of the space. She's landing Sunday. She said to tell you not to do anything until she gets there. I looked out the window at the dark road. The trap had closed, but it had also finally shown me exactly where the walls were. That meant I could start looking for the door. I left before Helen was fully awake. She was in the hallway when I came downstairs, robe, coffee cup, hair not yet combed. She heard me on the stairs and turned. Early errand, she said, something like that. I crossed to her, kissed her on the cheek the way I had for 40 years. Her skin was warm. She smelled like coffee and the same soap she'd used since 1987. She didn't lean in or pull back. She just stood there and accepted it the way you accept something ordinary. Don't forget your blood pressure medication, she said. I won't. I walked out to my truck and sat in the driveway with the engine running. She hadn't asked where I was going, hadn't asked when I'd be back, hadn't asked anything at all. A week ago, I would have called that comfortable. The ease of two people who'd been married long enough to stop needing explanations. Now I knew what it actually was. She didn't need to ask. She already knew everything she needed to know because she'd reported it at 1:14 in the morning while I was sitting in the dark in the next room. I pulled out of the driveway and drove to Smyrna, The cafe Agnes had chosen was on Atlanta Road. 4 tables, a hand-lettered chalkboard menu, the kind of neighborhood that had been the same for 30 years. She was already there when I walked in. Corner table farthest from the door, both hands wrapped around a black coffee like she needed something to hold on to. Agnes Whitfield was 61 years old. White hair short and practical, thick-framed glasses, the face of a woman who had spent decades in hospital corridors and learned to read a room the moment she entered it. She watched me cross the floor and sit down. "I almost didn't come," she said, "but you did. I've been carrying this for 11 years. She looked at her cup. "Mr. Tanner told me about the boy, about Caleb." She looked up. "That's why I came." "Tell me what happened," I said. She set the cup down and folded her hands. March 14th, 2013. Night shift, Wellstar Kennestone, 3rd floor cardiac unit. Helen and I had worked the same floor for 7 years. A patient came in at 9 that evening. Gerald Whitmore, 78 years old. Atrial fibrillation history, elevated heart rate, chest discomfort. Stable. Routine monitoring. The Helen was assigned to him. Helen was primary nurse on that end of the hall. I was 2 rooms down. She said it like a deposition: dates, locations, facts. Everything else after. At 11:47, his cardiac monitor alarmed. I heard it. It was not a false alarm. That sound is distinct. You learn the difference. "What did you do?" I was finishing a procedure. I assumed Helen had responded. Her jaw tightened slightly. When I came into the hallway, the alarm had been silenced. I assumed the doctor had been called. I assumed it was handled. It wasn't. I passed his room at 12:15. Gerald Whitmore was gone. Helen was standing at the foot of the bed. The crash cart had not moved. The doctor had not been called. She held my gaze without flinching. He had been in acute arrhythmia for at least 28 minutes with no intervention. The cafe was quiet around us. Someone ordered at the counter. Ordinary sounds. "Could it have been a mistake?" I asked. "Missing the alarm, could that have been an oversight?" "The alarm was silenced manually," Agnes said. "Someone pressed the button. Helen was the only staff member on that corridor between 11:30 and 12:15. I checked the movement log the next morning." "Did you report it?" "I wrote it in my personal notes." She looked down at the table. "I didn't file an official report. I wasn't certain I could prove intent. If I was wrong, I was accusing a colleague of killing a patient deliberately. I told myself that was why I stayed quiet." A long pause. "I told myself that for 11 years. What made you call Tanner? Because it wasn't a mistake." She said it quietly. No drama. Just the weight of a decision she'd made before she walked through the door. I knew it then, and I know it now. And when he told me a 13-year-old boy was in that house and no one was stopping it, I decided I was done carrying it for someone who never deserved the silence. I looked at her. "The morning after Mr. Whitmore died," she continued, "I came in for the early shift. Helen was near the elevator speaking with a man I didn't recognize. Quiet conversation. She was holding a white envelope. Agnes picked up her cup. I looked him up later. Raymond Whitmore. Gerald's son." I sat with that. A silenced alarm. No intervention. His son in the hallway the next morning with an envelope. "How much do you think was in it?" I asked. She didn't flinch. Gerald had been in declining health for 2 years. Raymond had already contested the will once. He needed it resolved. She set the cup down. "I don't know the amount, but I know what it bought." I left money on the table, stood up. "Agnes, I looked at her. I know this cost you something. She shook her head once. It cost Gerald Whitmore everything. It cost me 11 years of bad sleep. She looked up at me directly. Don't let it cost that boy anything more. I called Tanner from the parking lot. Raymond Whitmore, I said. Business connection to Prescott. Find it. Already found it. His voice had the flatness of confirmation. Raymond Whitmore and Prescott Rains, co-directors of a real estate LLC out of Nashville, Tennessee, April 2017 to December 2019. I stopped walking. Prescott learned about Helen through Raymond, I said. They were partners during Prescott's Nashville period. Raymond talks. Prescott listens. Prescott keeps records. Tanner paused. He had it before he ever met Diane. He walked into that relationship already holding the one thing that would make sure nobody stopped him. I stood in the parking lot and looked at nothing. 40 years of marriage. 40 years of breakfasts and medication reminders and book clubs and the same soap she'd used since 1987. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, a silenced alarm, an envelope and a choice she made without losing a night of sleep over it. Warren! Tanner's voice dropped. You doing okay? One long second. No, I said. But keep going. Carol called me this morning. She found something on Helen's phone last night. He paused. She's at your house right now. She said it has to be in person. I got in my truck. Whatever Helen had decided to protect Carol had just found it. Carol was at the kitchen table when I walked in. She'd taken a red-eye from Portland, landed sometime around midnight, let herself in with the spare key I'd given her 12 years ago, and never asked back. She was still in her travel clothes, dark jeans, a gray pullover, hair pulled back. She had a coffee in front of her, and both hands flat on the table like she was steadying herself. She looked up when I came through the door. I need to show you something, she said. No hello. No how are you, ba? Just that. I sat down across from her. She picked up her phone, opened the Photos app, and slid it across the table to me. Last night around 2 in the morning, Mom's phone was on the living room table. She must have left it when she went to bed. Carol's voice was even, controlled. The voice of someone who had spent the night deciding how to say this. It lit up. I was on the sofa. I saw the screen. I looked at the photo she'd taken. A text message. Incoming. Timestamp 1:47 a.m. October 22nd. No contact name, just a Georgia number I recognized from Tanner's call log. The message read, "Done. He won't get close again." I set the phone down. "There's more," Carol said. I scrolled up. Same number going back to the first week of October. Every time you told Mom something about Caleb, about the investigation, there's an outgoing message from her within the hour. She paused. Sometimes within 20 minutes. I didn't say anything. Dad. Her voice dropped slightly. She wasn't coerced into one phone call. This was a pattern. This was consistent. The back door opened. Helen came in from the garage, grocery bags in both hands, coat still on. She saw us at the table and stopped. Not startled, just still. Reading the room the way she always had in a single glance. She set the bags on the counter. "I didn't know you were coming," she said to Carol. "I know," Carol said. Helen looked at me. I stood up. "Sit down, Helen." Something crossed her face, not fear, not guilt. Something more calculated than either. She took off her coat, draped it over the back of a chair, and sat down at the head of the table. "What do you want to talk about?" she said. I put Carol's phone on the table in front of her. She looked at it. She looked at the screenshot. She looked at it for a long time without saying anything. "How long?" I said. Silence. "Mom." Carol's voice cracked slightly at the edges. "How long have you been doing this?" Helen folded her hands on the table. She looked up at me. Not at Carol. At me. "You don't understand the position I was in," she said. "Then explain it to me." She looked at her hands. "Prescott knows about Gerald Whitmore. He's known for years." She said it quietly, without drama. Raymond Whitmore told him. Prescott and Raymond were in business together. I didn't know that when it started. By the time I understood the connection, she stopped. "He already had everything." "He threatened you," I said. He never used that word. Her voice stayed level. He was always very careful about the words he used. He would just mention it. Remind me he knew. And if I didn't cooperate, he made it clear that the information would find its way somewhere. "To a licensing board," I said. "To the police." She didn't answer. "So you chose yourself," Carol said. "Over Caleb." Helen looked at her daughter for the first time. It wasn't that simple. Caleb is 13 years old. Carol's voice didn't rise. It went quieter, which was worse. "He wrote a letter asking for help. He put it in a drawer and hoped someone would find it." She leaned forward slightly. "You found it first." The kitchen was very still. I looked at my wife. "The letter, Helen. Caleb's handwritten letter. The one Ruth Calloway saw you burning in the backyard in August." Helen said nothing. "Ruth saw you," I said. "She saw the paper. She saw the smoke." I waited. "Were you going to tell me you'd seen it?" No answer. That was the answer. I stood up, went to the counter, stood there with my back to both of them for a moment. Looking at the grocery bags she'd carried in orange juice, bread, coffee filters, the ordinary materials of an ordinary morning. Then I turned around. "I need you to hear something," I said. My voice came out flat, not angry, past angry. "Caleb is 13 years old. He was locked in that house. He was hit. He tried to reach out the only way available to him, a letter, a hidden essay, a look at a friend that meant please tell someone. And every single route got blocked." I stopped. "You blocked one of them." Helen looked at the table. "I'm not asking you to explain anymore," I said. "I'm telling you what it was." I walked out of the kitchen. Carol was in the hallway. She'd gotten up quietly while I was talking without me noticing. She was standing with her back against the wall, arms crossed, looking at nothing. I stopped beside her. After a moment, she said quietly, "What do we do now, Dad?" "We go to the prosecutor," I said. She nodded once, straightened up. I already had everything in the truck. The school files, Roy's thumb drive, Tanner's call logs, Agnes's statement, the copy of Caleb's essay. Everything we'd spent 10 days collecting, organized in a folder on the back seat. Almost everything. There was one thing missing. Something that would prove Caleb hadn't just been hurt, he'd been confined, controlled. And I was almost certain it was still inside that house in Vinings behind the basement door that was always locked from the outside. I didn't know yet how to get to it, but Eleanor Voss might. We were in Eleanor Voss's office by 9 Friday morning. She gave us 45 minutes. Warren laid everything on the table, the school files, Roy's thumb drive, Tanner's call logs, Agnes's statement, Caleb's essay. Voss didn't interrupt once. When he finished, she closed her notepad and looked at us both. "I'll have GBI on this by Sunday morning," she said. "Don't go near that house." We didn't. The house had never felt so large. Carol stayed. She took the guest room without asking which was the right thing to do, and I didn't tell her to go home. We didn't talk much those first few hours after we got back from Fulton County. She made soup from whatever was in the refrigerator. I sat at the kitchen table and watched the backyard go gray in the afternoon light. Helen was in the house too. Moving through it, the way water moves around a stone, careful, quiet, taking up as little space as possible. We didn't speak. I wasn't ready to speak, and she seemed to understand that. Or maybe she just had nothing left to calculate. That first night Friday, I sat up until past 1 in the morning, not waiting for anything specific, just unable to be unconscious while Caleb was still inside that house in Vinings. Carol found me in the armchair around midnight. "You should sleep, Dad." "I know." She sat on the sofa, didn't tell me again. "Do you think Voss will actually move on this?" she asked. She said 48 hours. Politicians say a lot of things in 48 hours. She's not a politician. She's a prosecutor. I looked at the dark window. She had the same look Aldridge had when he pulled that 1999 file, the look of someone who already suspects something and just got confirmation. I paused. "She'll move." Carol pulled her knees up, quiet for a moment. "What about Mom?" I didn't answer right away. "Dad?" "I don't know yet," I said. That's an honest answer. I don't know what she told him, or how much of it matters to the case, or what Voss decides to do about it. I looked at my hands. But I know that whatever happens next, that's not the thing I'm thinking about tonight. Carol nodded. She understood. We sat there until 2. Then she went to bed, and I stayed another hour, and eventually the chair became uncomfortable enough that I went upstairs. Saturday passed like a waiting room. I made coffee, read the same 2 pages of a book 4 times, walked around the block once in the afternoon just to move. Carol worked at the kitchen table on something for her department papers, spread across the surface, red pen in hand, doing what she'd always done when she was anxious, staying useful. At 3:47 p.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered it on the first ring. "Mr. Beckett." A man's voice. Even professional. "My name is Marcus Webb. I'm a special agent with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. I've been assigned to the Raines matter by the DA's office." A brief pause. "I wanted to introduce myself. We'll be executing a search warrant at the Raines residence tomorrow morning early. I can't give you specifics, but I wanted you to know the process is moving." "Is Caleb still in the house?" I said. "I can't comment on that at this stage, Agent Webb." I kept my voice level. "That boy is 13 years old, and I haven't been able to reach him for 4 days. I understand procedure. I'm asking you as his grandfather." A pause, longer than the ones before it. "I can tell you that child welfare has been notified and will be present tomorrow," he said. "That's all I can say." "That's enough," I said. "Thank you." I hung up, went to the kitchen doorway. "Carol." She looked up from her papers. "Tomorrow morning," I said. She put the red pen down. Sunday arrived cold and overcast the sky, the flat white of a day that hadn't decided yet what it wanted to do. I was up before 5, made coffee, stood at the kitchen window, and watched the streetlight go off when the sky got pale enough to manage without it. At 7:15, Eleanor Voss called. "They're on site," she said. No preamble. "Search warrant covers the full property, including the lower level. Prescott Raines is present. His attorney has been notified. Caleb, Division of Family and Children Services has him. He's out of the house." A pause. "He's safe, Warren." I put my hand on the counter. The basement door, I said. We'll know what's there within the hour. Her voice was careful. Not warm, not cold. Professional in the way that meant she already suspected something and was managing how much she let herself feel it. I'll call you when I have something. She hung up. I stood at the counter and drank my coffee and didn't move for a long time. Carol came downstairs at 7:30. She looked at my face and didn't ask anything. At 8:52, Voss called back. Warren? Her voice was different this time. Quieter. The kind of quiet that means a room has just become very still. The basement. There's a bolt lock on the outside of the door. Inside, we found a mattress, a small lamp, and 12 sets of tally marks scratched into the drywall. My coffee cup was in my hand. I set it down very carefully. How many total? I asked. A pause. 47, she said. The kitchen was absolutely silent. 47 nights. Prescott Rains is being taken into custody, Voss said. I'll need you and your daughter in my office Monday morning. We have a case to build. I looked up. Carol was standing in the doorway watching me. I didn't need to say anything. She read it on my face, all of it, in the time it took her to cross the room and put her hand on my arm. He's out, I said. Caleb's out. She didn't say anything back. She just held on. And for the first time in 11 days, I let myself sit down. The police tape was already up when we got there. Carol had driven. I'd sat in the passenger seat the whole way from Marietta without saying much, watching the Sunday morning streets go by empty gas stations, a church parking lot filling up, a jogger with a yellow lab who had no idea what was happening 2 miles away on a cul-de-sac in Vinings. We parked on Pace's Ferry Road and walked to the perimeter. Yellow tape stretched between 2 GBI vehicles blocking the entrance to the cul-de-sac. 3 neighbors stood on the far sidewalk in coats and coffee cups watching. I recognized the street. I had stood at the end of it 12 days ago in the dark, looking at a brick house with lanterns by the door and a wreath that still hadn't come down. Nathan Freed was waiting near the tape. I had met him once briefly in Eleanor Voss's office, her second chair, 36 years old, the kind of prosecutor who wrote everything down and trusted nothing he hadn't verified himself. He had a notepad in his coat pocket and a coffee he hadn't touched. They're inside, he said before I could ask. Basement access confirmed about 20 minutes ago. Caleb, Citena, still in the house. Diane is with him. Prescott is cooperating. He's on the lawn. I looked past Nathan's shoulder. Prescott was standing on the grass in front of his house, maybe 40 meters away. White dress shirt, arms crossed. The expression of a man waiting for a delayed flight, inconvenienced, not afraid. 2 GBI agents stood nearby, not restraining him. Not yet. I watched him for a moment. He didn't look in my direction. What are they looking for specifically? Carol asked Nathan. The warrant covers the full structure, but the basement is the focus. He checked his phone. Voss described what your father told her about the door, external bolt, no interior access. That was enough for the affidavit. We waited. The November cold was coming early this year. The sky was flat white, no sun, the kind of morning that just gets gradually less dark without ever feeling like daylight. I put my hands in my coat pockets and stood there and watched the front door of Prescott Rains's house and thought about a 13-year-old boy who was still somewhere inside it. 22 minutes later, Nathan's phone buzzed. He read the screen. Didn't say anything for a moment. What? I said. They found the room. He turned slightly away and made a call. I watched his back. He stood very still, phone pressed hard against his ear, and said almost nothing, just listened. Then he asked one question, short and quiet. How many? He turned back around, looked at me. 47, he said. I didn't understand right away. 47 what? Tally marks. On the drywall interior wall, lower corner eye level for a child. Scratched in with what looks like a nail or a screw. Nathan kept his voice professional. Even. The voice of a man who had learned to deliver facts without letting them land on his face. Groups of 5. 47 total. The cul-de-sac was quiet around us. 47 days. Not consecutive maybe, but 47 times that boy had decided the day was worth marking. 47 times he'd scratched a line into the wall of a basement room and said, I was here. This day happened. I counted it. Bah. Carol's hand came down on my shoulder. I didn't say anything back. There wasn't anything to say that the number hadn't already said better. The front door of the house opened. A female GBI agent came out first. Behind her, Caleb. Blue t-shirt hanging loose off shoulders that had no business being that narrow on a 13-year-old. He stepped into the daylight and stopped, not squinting, just still. The careful stillness of someone who had forgotten that outside was allowed. He looked at the open sky like he wasn't sure it would stay. Then he looked toward the perimeter. He saw me. I raised one hand. Just that, a slow, simple wave. Nothing more. He looked at me for a moment. Then he looked away and followed the agent toward a dark SUV parked at the side of the house. I let out a breath I'd been holding since October 14th. On the lawn, things were moving. 2 agents approached Prescott. He turned toward them, still composed, still the same expression. Mr. Rains. The first agent's voice carried clearly in the cold air. We need you to come with us. On what grounds? Aggravated battery, false imprisonment, cruelty to a child in the 1st degree. The agent reached for Prescott's arm. He didn't pull away. He stood straight while they positioned him, while the second agent moved to his other side. You have the right to remain silent. I want my lawyer. Prescott's voice was flat, professional, the voice of a man who had planned for this possibility. He turned his head. Across the tape, across 40 meters of cold November lawn, he found me. We looked at each other. I don't know what he expected to see. Satisfaction, maybe. Anger. Something he could use or file away. I kept my face still and let him look for as long as he needed. He didn't find whatever he was looking for. He turned away and walked with the agents toward the vehicle without another word. Carol exhaled beside me. It's over. Not yet, I said. This is just the end of the first part. Nathan stepped back to us. One more thing. Briggs, his supervisor, wants a meeting with Voss this afternoon. About the $15,000 and the 2 buried reports. Good, I said. I meant it. But I also knew what was coming. Prescott was in custody. Stanford Keel, his attorney, the best criminal defense lawyer in Fulton County, would be on the phone before that car reached the station. And whatever happened in that courtroom in the months ahead, Keel would make sure it cost something to prove. Carol drove us home. I watched Vinings disappear in the side mirror and thought about 47 marks scratched into drywall by a 13-year-old who hadn't stopped counting. He had counted because he still believed someone was coming. I was going to make sure that belief had been worth it. 5 months is long enough to forget what a house sounds like with 2 people in it. Helen had left the night after the confrontation in the kitchen, packed a bag, called someone I didn't know, and walked out without a scene. She didn't slam the door. That was the part that stayed with me. 40 years, and she left the way you leave a hotel room, quietly, completely, without looking back to check if she'd forgotten anything. Carol moved her things from the guest room into the bedroom across the hall and stayed. We didn't talk about it much. We made coffee in the mornings and sat at the table and got through the days. Some mornings, that was enough. 3 weeks before the trial, she found me at the kitchen window before 7. Did you sleep? Some, I said. 3 weeks. I know. She poured her coffee and stood beside me. Outside the yard was gray with early spring. The dogwood had started coming back pale and tentative, like it wasn't sure yet. Are you scared? She asked. I thought about it. I'm scared Prescott walks. I'm not scared of anything else. She nodded, didn't push it further. That was the honest answer. Stanford Keel had made sure of that. Keeley was 54 years old, silver-haired, the kind of defense attorney who billed $800 an hour and was worth every cent to the people who could afford him. I had never met him in person. I knew him through Eleanor Voss's voice, the particular tightness that came into it whenever she said his name. He had spent 5 months making our case harder. In December, he filed a motion to suppress the dashcam footage, arguing the camera angle, the timestamp metadata, and the chain of custody from Roy Fenton to GBI created enough ambiguity for reasonable doubt. Eleanor fought it. The motion was denied in January, but it cost 3 weeks and a supplemental hearing. In February, he moved to exclude Agnes Whitfield's testimony entirely personal bias. He argued relevance to current charges, questionable prejudicial effect, outweighing probative value. Eleanor called me the night before the ruling. He's going to keep pushing on Agnes, she said. Keel knows she's the thread that connects Helen to Prescott's leverage. If he pulls her out of the picture, the coercion angle weakens. Can he do it? He can try. The judge has discretion. A pause. I need you to understand, Keel is going to put you on the stand and ask you why you started investigating in October. He'll argue you had a personal financial motive, that you wanted Prescott removed so you could access Diane's custody arrangement and protect your retirement account. I was quiet for a moment. That's not why I started. I know. Her voice was careful. But you need the jury to see that custody is where you ended up, not where you began. There's a difference between a grandfather who investigated abuse and then sought guardianship, and a grandfather who manufactured a case to gain guardianship. Keela will argue the second. We need to show the first. How? By putting Caleb on the stand last, she said, and letting him tell it himself. Diane called me in March. Not through a lawyer, not through Eleanor. Just a text at 8:15 on a Tuesday morning. Can we meet somewhere quiet? Just us. She chose a coffee shop in Buckhead's small place back corner booth, the kind of spot where nobody looked twice at a woman with red eyes. She was already there when Carol and I arrived. She didn't look up right away. I know I didn't protect him, she said, before either of us sat down. I need you to know I know that. I sat down across from her, Carol beside me. I'm going to testify, Diane said. Everything. The 17 texts I sent Caleb that never got a reply. I knew Prescott was intercepting them. I knew, and I told myself it was a phase, that things would settle, that I was misreading it. She stopped. I was a coward. Why now? Carol asked. Not harsh, just direct. Diane looked up. Her eyes were dry now, past the point where crying helped. Because I saw the photograph of that room, the mattress, the lamp. She pressed her lips together. 47 marks, and I counted backward. I thought about where I was on each one of those days, what I was doing, what I told myself. She looked at me. I need to say it out loud in that courtroom. I need Caleb to hear me say it. I looked at my daughter. Okay, I said. Okay. In March, Donna Stiles resigned from Harwell Middle School. The district opened a formal review of both buried reports. Nobody called it what it was out loud. Everyone knew what it was. Mason had been placed with Prescott's sister in Savannah 2 days after the arrest. I didn't know her. I hoped she was better than her brother. Gordon Fitch filed the joint custody petition in April. Warren Beckett and Carol Beckett listed as co-petitioners for legal guardianship of Caleb Rains. Eleanor's office provided a supporting statement. The family court judge scheduled a hearing for after the criminal trial. Kelo immediately filed an objection, arguing the petition was prejudicial to his client's case and should be stayed pending verdict. Eleanor called me the afternoon the objection came in. "He's rattled," she said. "Good," I said. "Don't get comfortable. Rattled lawyers are more dangerous than confident ones." The night before the trial, I sat alone in the kitchen after Carol had gone to bed. I wasn't reviewing anything. There was nothing left to review. Eleanor had everything. Nathan had everything. The jury would be seated tomorrow morning, and then it would be out of my hands. I heard Carol on the stairs around 11. She came in, saw me at the table, and didn't say anything for a moment. "Dad, I'm fine." "I know." She leaned against the doorframe. "What are you thinking about?" "Ida Caleb," I said. "I want him to know someone will be there tomorrow. Whatever happens in that room, he's not going to be looking out at empty seats." Carol was quiet. "He knows Ba. I want to be sure." At midnight, my phone buzzed. "Eleanor." "When Miriam Holt finished the decryption analysis," she said. Her voice was controlled, but underneath it something close to satisfied. "Prescott's phone. There are 14 messages between him and Briggs during the investigation period. Explicit. Briggs is done, he'll be arraigned on obstruction charges Friday." I sat with that for a moment. "We still have to win tomorrow," I said. "Yes," Eleanor said. "We do." I set the phone down. Upstairs, I found the tie in the back of the closet, navy blue, the one I'd worn the first day I walked into a classroom 34 years ago. I didn't know why I'd kept it. I laid it across the chair beside the bed and went to sleep. In the morning, Carol saw it before I could say anything. She looked at it, then at me. Then she nodded once. We drove to Fulton County Superior Court without saying a word. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. I don't know what I'd been imagining all these months. Something vast, maybe with ceilings high enough to hold the weight of everything that had happened. What I got was a room with fluorescent lighting, wood-paneled walls, and 43 seats in the gallery. Carol and I were in the second row. Diane sat 2 seats down alone, hands folded in her lap, eyes forward. Prescott was at the defense table in a dark gray suit. Stanford Keel sat beside him, a yellow legal pad in front of him, unhurried. 8 months of preparation, and Keel still looked like a man who had nowhere better to be. Eleanor Voss stood at the prosecution table and didn't look at any of us. Judge Patricia Holden entered at 9:02 a.m. The room stood. She sat. We sat. And it began. Beverly Marsh took the stand first. She was calm, the same controlled voice I'd heard on the phone that October night, except now it was aimed at 12 jurors instead of 1 retired teacher. She described Eli's account, the phone call, the bruises, as her son had described them. Keel cross-examined for 11 minutes. Beverly didn't waver once. Then Eli, 13 years old, same age as Caleb, wearing a blue button-down that looked like his mother had ironed it that morning. He sat straight in the witness chair and answered every question clearly. When Eleanor asked him what Caleb had said about the marks on his arms, Eli looked at the jury, not at the floor. "He told me he fell, but his voice was wrong when he said it." Eli paused. "He made me promise not to tell." Another pause, shorter. "But he also looked at me like he hoped I would." The room was very quiet. Roy Fenton brought the laptop himself. Eleanor had it connected to the projection screen before he finished taking the oath. When the 23 seconds played, timestamp 6:47 p.m. June 3, 2024, Prescott's hand clamping down on Caleb's left shoulder, the boy's body pulling away instinctively, the door closing. Nobody in that gallery made a sound. Keel objected to the metadata authentication. The judge overruled him in 4 words. Coach Delaney followed with the 2 original reports. April and August, both stamped, received Donna Stiles, administrative coordinator. Neither forwarded, neither acted upon. Delaney kept his voice level throughout. When he stepped down, one juror in the back row was writing something on her notepad and didn't stop for a long time. Then, Ms. Patricia Lund. She carried the essay in a clear evidence sleeve and read it standing at the podium, her reading glasses on her voice unhurried. She read every word Caleb had written, the careful sentences, the controlled vocabulary of a boy who had learned not to say things directly. And at the end, she read the last line the way you read something that deserves to be heard properly. See, home is where no one checks if the door is locked from the outside. I heard someone behind me exhale. Nathan Freed presented the fabricated evidence list found in Mason's backpack, a detailed accounting of how Prescott had attempted to shift blame items, planted timestamps inconsistent, handwriting analysis conclusive. Keel's cross-examination was short. There wasn't much to work with. Then Diane. She walked to the stand without looking at Prescott. She had 17 screenshots printed and numbered. Eleanor handed them to her one by one, and Diane read each text message she had sent Caleb, each one unanswered, each one returned to silence. Her voice was steady through the first 8. On the 9th message, Caleb, please just tell me you're okay. I just need to know you're okay. Her voice broke. She didn't stop. She pressed her hand flat on the railing, steadied herself, and kept reading. All 17. Every unanswered word. When she stepped down, she walked past the defense table without slowing. Caleb was last. He walked in from the side door with Gordon Fitch 2 steps behind him. 13 years old. White shirt, dark pants, hair combed. He sat in the witness chair and adjusted the microphone himself without being asked. For the next 40 minutes, he answered every question Eleanor put to him. He described the basement room. He described the nights. He described the 47 marks on the wall. I didn't want to forget how many there were. And he described the morning he stopped making them because he decided someone was going to come before he needed to make another one. He never looked at Prescott. Not once. Not when Keel cross-examined. Not when Keel's voice went soft and insinuating and asked him if he was sure he remembered things correctly. Yes, Caleb said. I'm sure. That was all. Judge Patricia Holden received the jury's verdict at 3:17 p.m. She read it without expression. Then she looked up at Prescott Rains and said it plainly, the way you say something that has been true for a long time and is only now being said out loud. On all counts, guilty. I put my hand over Carol's. She didn't move. Neither did I. The hallway outside was bright with afternoon sun through the tall windows. Carol and I were standing near the far wall when Caleb came through the side door with Gordon Fitch. He looked around the hallway, scanning the way he'd scanned the cul-de-sac that October morning, and then he found us. He walked over, stopped in front of me. I didn't say anything right away. Neither did he. Gordon Fitch stepped forward and held out a single folded document. Order granting guardianship Warren Beckett and Carol Beckett. Effective immediately. I took it. Carol looked at it over my shoulder, then looked at Caleb. You're coming home with us. Your house? Caleb asked. My house, I said. The storage room's going to be your room. I'll clear it out this weekend. He nodded. Then after a moment, can you cook? Well enough. He looked at Carol. Can she cook? Carol laughed, the first real laugh I'd heard from her in months. Better than your grandfather. Caleb nodded slowly with the gravity of someone making an important decision. Okay, that works. Then his expression shifted. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a phone Gordon Fitch's borrowed and dialed. 2 feet away from me, he held it to his ear. My phone rang. I looked at him. He looked at me. I answered. Grandpa. His voice was quiet, steady. I just want to say one thing. Go ahead. Thank you. I know you did a lot. I looked at this boy, 13 years old, white shirt, hair combed, standing in a courthouse hallway in the afternoon sun, and I thought about October 14th, and a cold cup of coffee, and a phone ringing in the dark. I should have come sooner, I said. But you came. He held my gaze. That's what I needed. Carol put her hand on my arm. The afternoon light came through the tall windows and fell across the three of us, long and warm, the way it does at the end of a day that has finally decided what it wanted to be. Let's go home, I said. Caleb nodded, and we walked out together. They say God doesn't close a door without opening a window somewhere. I used to think that was something people said to fill silence. Now, I think it's true. I just think sometimes the window is on the second floor behind a curtain, and you have to stand in the dark long enough to see it. This is a family story I never wanted to have, a dad revenge I never planned to take. I was a retired teacher who thought he knew his own household. I didn't. I told myself Caleb was fine because fine was easier to believe than the alternative. I waited too long. I asked too few questions. I trusted the wrong person with the most important information I had. Don't be me. If something feels wrong with a child, you love a change in posture, a careful silence, a smile that doesn't reach the eyes. Don't wait for certainty. Certainty comes too late. Go toward the discomfort. Ask the question that makes the room go quiet. Every family story has a moment where someone could have spoken sooner. Every dad revenge worth taking starts not with anger, but with showing up. The real ending isn't the verdict. It isn't the courtroom or the handcuffs or the guilty on all counts. It's a 13-year-old boy standing in afternoon light asking if you can cook. That's the ending that matters. That's the dad revenge that costs everything and gives back more. That's the family story you carry for the rest of your life. If this story reached something in, you leave a comment, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you're there when the next door opens. You won't want to miss what's coming. Thank you for staying until the very end. It means more than you know. A note going forward, some upcoming stories contain fictional elements, constructed purely for educational and emotional purposes. If that's not for you, that's completely okay. Step away and find something that fits better. No one is kept here by pressure, only by the story.